Hello, we're here today with Rich Wilson from Relative Insight. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
So first of all, I think it would be really useful if you would give our lovely viewers a bit of background about let's start with you before we talk about Relative Insight, if that's all right.
Thank you. I'll talk about me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not normal, as many people tell me. And my background's not normal. So I trained as a software engineer at university, and I was a developer for many years during the first .com boom. So I saw the rise and the fall and all of that. And then I got involved more and more on the commercial side, and found that I really enjoyed going out and meeting people more than sitting in a darkened room. And,
do you still code in your spare time?
A very small amount.
Do you like my code
That
symbol?
is the international language for coding. Yeah. Yeah, so I started going out. It was actually sales guys at an old company I was working as a consultant at that started taking me out to meetings.
Cool.
Because they realised I could talk as well as code. And so I did a lot of that and got involved in some pretty interesting projects and purely on the commercial side and just all of a sudden found myself doing that a lot more and ended up involved in bringing over 2 American software firms over to Europe. Both were huge successes. So thought I was a god, had to learn that I wasn't, proved that to myself, and then I built and sold a options trading technology business. And then in the words of my other half, I was dicking around with friends for a while, and I already knew Ben Hookway, who's our CEO at Relative, and he asked me to help out on some of the marketing stuff, and I got to know their investors, and then 3.5 years later, I'm still here. Yeah, so now I'm CMO at Relative Insight. Very
cool. And so Relative Insight, tell us a bit about who they are, who you are, what they do.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one because it's the first time actually my friends and family understand what I do for a living. You know, it's all been data businesses.
Yeah.
But this one, with it being around language, everyone gets it, right? So Relative has this rather unique background in that what we do now is help brands relate to audiences by turning language into data. But the origins of the business are actually in a 10-year research project into criminal linguistics. So this was a collaboration between a couple of government agencies and Lancaster University.
Amazing.
And yeah, it's really cool stuff and we continue to do that. So the technology that was originally developed was for use in child protection. So we still do that. We've done a bit of counter-terrorism work, lots of domestic intelligence stuff, all of which we can't talk about. So
and wasn't there something that about, like, you can tell how old somebody is by the way that they write online? Or
yeah.
like that? Or can we not talk about this bit?
We can talk about some aspects of it, not all of it. So essentially in child protection, one of the many things that we do is we can identify when it's a 12-year-old girl talking online or a 50-year-old guy masquerading as a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And we do this by comparing language at a pretty big scale. And the reason we compare is it's an inherent filtering capability that we use all the time in our brains. We've automated that with technology. It's a very comparing is a very useful filtering mechanism. So we developed this in our brains, not us, but 200,000 years ago, we developed this capability to compare, to kind of filter out noise. So you're doing it right now, although you're probably not aware. You're comparing what I'm saying to what I've said previously to you, to what other people have said about language. And that enables you to reduce the cognitive load and just focus on the stuff that's important. So I think what I'm saying is 95% of what I'm saying is useless. It's the little differences that are interesting and sometimes commonality as well.
Yeah.
And it's that comparison piece that we apply with the brands, and it's useful for lots and lots of interesting things.
Absolutely. And what would you say is has been your sort of favorite example of something that you've done with a business, or one of the clients that you work with?
It's hard to say because we're continuously doing new things, and there's not I mean, I was discussing with a friend this morning, we have this inherent problem that language has lots of different applications. So when we go to talk to people about our capability, they have 100 different ideas about how they can use it. And it's trying to figure out which is going to be most useful for them and which is actually just a vanity project, you know. I think one of the most recent ones has been with one of the big brand groups. They've been using us for SWOT analysis. So I mean, it hadn't clicked with me, but that's exactly what we do. So there's a lady in India, Yash, said to me, the great thing about what you do is you enable us to do something that we've never really been able to achieve before. So she explained that she had an inherent problem with the brands that she works with. They come to her and say, right, we want to know how people are talking about our dessert brand on Twitter. And she said that's really boring. And actually a lot of it is noise, and there is some value in it, but it's very limited. It's akin to counting words. And actually what we want to do as a business is understand strategically what are our strengths and weaknesses versus the competitors.
Yeah.
And by virtue of being a comparative process, Relative enables that. So we helped her identify those strengths and weaknesses. And actually it led to her finding 2 new brand activations for them, which is, I mean, that's gold, right, for a brand, especially for an established brand. Yeah,
absolutely. So what do you think that working with language in this way has told you about your own vocabulary?
So when we often, just as we don't really use this commercially, but as a kind of party trick, we can take your Twitter feed and we can tell you how old you are, and we do gender analysis as well, so sex analysis. And sex we get almost spot on.
Yeah.
Age within about 5 years, and we get lots of other stuff around how people talk and the topics of conversation, the style of language. Turns out I didn't know. I thought I was quite a negative person. I'm quite a positive person when you look at my use of language.
And that's come from what? Social profiles and things like that?
Social, yeah. So just looking at how I talk on Twitter, I don't know. I guess it's the industry I work in. You have to be a bit of an optimist because otherwise, you know, it's quite tough going. But I'm unexpectedly optimistic, and I swear a lot.
There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Well, it turns out there's a correlation, and you have to be careful with correlation in research. It's not causation. But intelligent people tend to swear a lot. So that's my justification. Right?
That's brilliant. I will make it mine from here on in. And I guess a lot of what you're doing is helping businesses to find, do you help them find an authentic tone of voice? Would you work on that, or are you just assessing the language that they are?
It's one part of what we do. So you can sort of split what we do between that sort of creative work, understanding a target audience and making sure messages resonate better with them. You know, the brand relates to their audience. And that's a big part of what we do. But there's a kind of performance marketing as well, so we can help people on with media and targeting by understanding the audience and kind of making sure that you're aiming at the right people. And that seems to be an increasingly large part of what we do. But there's also a kind of strategic thing that happens with language as well. It kind of transcends that sort of direct messaging input, and it starts to have an input in different areas as well, unexpectedly. I'm trying to think of a good example where we've done work for a retailer where it not only impacted how the kind of subjects that their sales teams talk about, but also the process that they adopt when people walk in a store. If you think about for this particular project, we compared how millennials, whatever your definition of it, in this case it was 18 to 29-year-olds. It's quite broad, but if you compare how that group talk about in this case, mobile phones, with how people my age and north talk about mobile phones. We're interested in completely different things, right?
And what kinds of things? What are the differences?
So I open a phone manual, a phone box, and wonder where the fucking manual is, right? Because I need support. Whereas millennials tend to, I mean, they open the box, and they rip it open, they're using the phone straight away.
Right.
First,
I think I might be a millennial.
You a millennial?
I might be a millennial then.
You are a millennial.
Wow. I'm a 37-year-old millennial.
Brilliant. That's good.
I'm just down with the kids.
I know that. You see your knowledge of their vocabulary.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But they, because of that, they're interested in battery life.
Yeah.
So there's a cross-sell opportunity, you know, battery pack. They're much more interested in the use of the camera.
Yeah.
So you talk to them about the camera, whereas, you know, if I walk in the store, talk to me about my family and where I'm going to get help from.
Yeah.
That, you know, that's a very simple game.
That's very different.
And that's very strategic.
And actually, there was a lovely example of language that I saw on some of the stuff that I saw about relative insight online, which was the phrase shot on an iPhone or shot by iPhone and shot. And do you want to talk to us a bit about that? Yeah,
well, it actually, I mean, Apple use it infamously on their billboards now, but it actually came from our research for Microsoft Mobile before them. So they...
dun, dun, dun. World first, everyone.
Yeah. So Microsoft Mobile were launching a new camera phone, and it had this amazing camera on it.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they were aiming it at digital SLR enthusiasts, so fairly expensive camera enthusiasts, amateur photographers, basically. So, and they created a campaign around this. And guy we bumped into at an event, he explained that he owned one of these cameras, was looking at the campaign and thinking, well, this language doesn't resonate with me, but you know, he tried to explain this and was told politely that campaign team they'd worked very hard on the content, you know, a lot of politics at play here and vested interest, and it was all happening. So he said to us, look, if you can provide me evidence to back up my anecdote, then that's a huge thing. And that's exactly what we did. We scooped up language from a couple of specialist forums where these people were talking about photography and compared it to how so-called regular consumers, you and I, were talking about cameras and photography. And he was absolutely right. And we did this amazing thing where it happens quite a lot, I guess, but produced a 60-page report that no one actually read. You know, they read the abstract at the beginning, and it had maybe a dozen pieces of insight. And number one was so in the campaign content, they were talking about taking great photos with this amazing device. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it was taking photos.
Yeah.
And they don't use that language. They talk about shooting images, and they assume that you're not part of their tribe, and therefore they switch off. That's it. Yeah. So the content was getting it wrong, but they didn't even know that. And the key thing about it is it's an unknown unknown. Yeah. So Donald Rumsfeld infamously talked about this during the Iraq War, and he used very clumsy language at the time, but he was right. So there's this thing about not knowing what to search for. It's just an unknown unknowns. We know that there may be a problem, but we don't know where it is or what it might be. And that's exactly what we find. We think of ourselves as kind of a discovery engine as opposed to a search engine. You know, you don't have to know what you're searching for. We just bubble it up. And of course, it caused an absolute shitstorm at Nokia. But they changed the language, and ultimately that was a huge success. And Apple stole it.
And now it's everywhere on the underground network.
Yeah, yeah.
So looking at language in the HR arena specifically, can you give us any examples of the sorts of different clients that you've supported with their language around people, around their people?
Well, it's all about people. I wouldn't. So one of the things we're very careful not to do is kind of, say we're about a particular industry.
Yeah.
It'd be very easy for us to, I don't know, focusing on retail, for example, or telcos. We've done lots of work in those areas, but we find that a lot of the things we uncover are applicable across the board, and that is definitely the case with HR. I think it strikes me that you're selling to people just as much as they're selling to
All
you
the time,
now.
yeah.
So it's the same rules of selling that apply, which, you know, Ogilvy infamously said, you need to speak in their language, and that applies here.
Yeah. And so looking specifically at, you know, at something that's very close to our hearts at Shazam at this point, mine certainly, is looking at the level of diversity that we have within the organisation, and the ways that we can make sure that we maximise that, right?
Yeah.
So looking at things like, you know, job descriptions and the way that they're written and whether there are any biases there, is that something that you guys have done any particular kind of research into?
Yeah, we've got a lot of understanding of the impact of gender in particular from work we've done in all kinds of areas, politics and the brand stuff as well. Politics is really interesting because, especially in this country, there's historically always been a push to appeal to men.
Yeah.
And that's a safe space for politicians, for even female politicians. But there are approaches you can take to language that appeal to women. Now, MPs will tell you that they're quite almost afraid of doing that because they would lose their safe space, they're men.
Yeah.
So, you know, it might jeopardize things. But actually, the research shows that by appealing to women, you appeal to men as well, and everyone in between. In fact, if you and I think this idea of gender being a spectrum has become an increasing part of what we do. So it's not binary. You know, there is no binary distinction.
Yeah.
There is in sex, obviously, but not in gender, and there are shades of grey, and you need to make sure you appeal to everyone in the language that you use, particularly in recruitment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hugely important part.
And so you're actually saying then that if you're writing something more for a female audience, let's say female audience, well, that it wouldn't put off, you know, if we're talking
if you take the female audience as purely an audience and ignore the gender-specific nature of it. There are characteristics that resonate with that particular audience that we found in our research, and that's how we identified sex in language as well. But they apply. It turns out if you start to reflect those, they appeal to men just as much as women. So the obvious one is the use of pronouns, which is generally considered a feminine characteristic. Turns out it's also an inclusive characteristic.
Right.
And people respond better to the inclusive nature of the use of pronouns. So, yeah, that's one of many, I think.
Yeah. And do you think, therefore, that something like language, which, of course, is everywhere and in everything we do, as organisations and as humans, do you think that that can really move the needle on something like the diversity issue for an organisation? Yeah,
hugely so. I mean, it's been really interesting to watch what's going on with pronoun use. It's an evolving thing right now, but there is an argument to say that we should be using non-binary pronouns. So when we're addressing people, HSBC are sort of leading the way in this in the forms that they're using now. So there are lots of different options you can put to. You can be addressed as mix rather than miss or Mr. or Miss, or you can use whatever you want. Basically.
And that's internally and externally?
Externally.
Externally.
Yeah. I guess they're reflecting it internally.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah, yeah. And we're starting to see it in the media as well. There's a program called Billions on Sky, you may have heard of. And there's a character in that, Taylor, who I started watching the program because it's about financial markets and I'm interested in that. And all of a sudden this character appears, Taylor, and she doesn't see, I'm making a mistake straight away. Yeah. They don't identify as male or female, so and they announce themselves as my pronouns are they, them, and their. Right. So, and it's an interesting. It's slightly discordant because you're not used to it, but it's inclusive to start using pronouns like that. It affects everyone. And I've talked to people before about this, and some people see it as kind of political correctness gone mad. You know, we're trying to be inclusive to everyone. Where does it end? It's not politically correct. It's just being nice, actually.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I can see that it would involve a huge amount of a massive step change for everyone to try to incorporate that.
Yeah.
Within their own language, let alone within that of an
I mean, I just made the mistake, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's tricky.
But maybe we'll get there. Maybe it will be in our lifetimes. I don't know.
I think it's already happening.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to get there.
Yeah, very cool. And so tell us a bit more, going back to you a little bit more, where do you do your learning?
So I think one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I get to meet lots of lovely, interesting people like you. And with the brands and the agencies and everyone that I went from a position where I'd be, in a darkened room developing coding, to meeting new people every day, and that's where I learn. And particularly with my job, because I'm a data person, and I come from a strong technology. I'm very logically minded. And I meet people every day that challenge that. They kind of say, well, what about this? They're very sort of creative thinkers. So I love that aspect to what I do and getting their perspective. It's a bit like, I treat meeting people as like reading a book. It's a bit,
absolutely.
You're playing a video game and you get a power up for some reason. And reading a book's like that. It's like a power up for your mind. And meeting people for me is the same thing. You're kind of getting their thoughts on the world and their particular perspective, and I like to be challenged.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think people often say that to me because I interview people all day. They're like, isn't that boring? I'm like, well, you could see it like that, or you could see it as an opportunity to learn. Yeah. And yes, sure, I'm there assessing whether this person's going to be the right fit for Shazam. Yeah. Sure, that's ultimately what I'm doing. But I'm learning so much on a global level about what's going on in people's lives and people's businesses all of the time. Yeah. I'm like the nosiest person on the planet.
Me too.
And who would you say impresses you the most in the professional arena right now? So who would you like to see us talk to, for example, next?
So there's a few standout people. I get to meet lots of really interesting people, like famous and not so famous. Yeah. I think the people who don't realise how influential they are the most interesting, and they're quite rare though. But there are some people who know they're interested. So I met a chap called Scott Galloway last year. We were at Cannes Lions, and we were on the RGA training.
The infamous Cannes Lions.
Yes. And we got.
I hear, as an aside, I hear stories upon stories about Cannes Lions. I'm yet to go. I haven't been, but it sounds exciting.
It is a lot of fun. Yeah. And you get. So last year, met Mark Ronson, went to his house party, meet Alicia Dixon.
Just casual.
And that, they're interesting people, but some of the agency people are far more interesting. So Scott Galloway is one, but he's kind of famous. He built a firm called L2, and he's possibly the most British American I know. He has a very sort of dry sense of humour, and the L2 is a research firm, and he's very good at distilling his research, and they produce a lot of video content, so you can go onto Facebook and YouTube and watch his videos and see how dry his humour and British his humour is. So he's someone that I would recommend interviewing. In the UK, there's a lady called Emily Shaw, who I first met a couple of years ago. She was working for Geometry, the WPP agency. She's just moved to an agency called Freeman's XP, but she's head of strategy there, and she's one of these people that doesn't know how influential she is, but she's a very creative thinker, and she has become a good friend as well, and challenges me a lot on my logical thinking. On
lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And are you a podcast person? Do you have a favourite?
I don't. There's A16Z, Ben Horowitz, the VC, his thing, and Mark Andreessen. I don't really listen to. I listen to a lot of music.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. Me too. My trouble with listening to podcasts and things like that is that I might start thinking about something and then I don't know what I've missed. Same with audiobooks.
I lose my train of thought.
I'm much better with a book where I can see where you know, I can look back and go, I missed that bit.
Yeah, I find myself constantly rewinding.
Yeah. And what's your favourite thing to do in the morning?
So I have this weird thing. I hate running.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not running?
But it is running. But it's running. So I have an 8-year-old son, and I've discovered that actually going running with him in the morning is just amazing, because he jabbers at me and he tells me anything and everything about what's going on in his life, and
whilst running.
Well, yeah, incredibly. I'm exhausted, falling apart, and he's telling me about new Pokemon power-ups.
He's like, "Come on, Dad."
Yeah, literally. But it's one of those things that, I hate running, but I love running with him.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty sweet.
And it sort of keeps me fit
a
little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for speaking with me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Me.
And, well, I hope we see lots more of you everywhere.
Absolutely. Me too.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.